Stephen Colbert dropped a revelation live on air. This report confirms Barron's real mother, and her name starts with the letter I. The room went silent. The audience gasped, and the president was left completely speechless. What happened next stunned everyone. It was an ordinary evening at the Late Show. The audience had settled into their seats, chatting quietly, sipping drinks, and waiting for the familiar energy that Stephen Colbert always brought to the stage. People were ready for jokes, stories, and a little bit of sharp commentary, but no one was expecting what happened next. Suddenly, the doors at the side of the stage opened. There was a ripple of surprise and curiosity, but it quickly turned into a collective gasp. Walking confidently toward the desk was none other than President Donald Trump. For a moment, the audience froze. Some people whispered to each other, unsure if their eyes were playing tricks. Others sat completely still, their mouths slightly open. The air felt heavier, charged with both tension and excitement. This wasn't just a celebrity guest walking in, it was the president, appearing in a way no one had anticipated. Trump walked with his usual confident stride, a slight smirk on his face. He waved at the audience, who responded with a mixture of cheers, murmurs, and hesitant claps. His presence instantly changed the energy in the room. What was supposed to be a night of laughter and lighthearted conversation now felt like the start of something unpredictable. People could sense that anything could happen. He didn't sit down right away. Instead, he raised his hand slightly and spoke in his familiar, assured tone. "I'm here to clear up some crazy rumors," he said. His voice carried through the studio, commanding attention. The crowd quieted immediately. Whispers died down, replaced by a collective focus. Everyone wanted to hear what the president had to say. The phrase "crazy rumors" hung in the air. What rumors was he talking about? Were they about politics, business, family, or something entirely unexpected? No one could be sure. The mystery made the moment even more gripping. People leaned forward in their seats, eager for clarity. Trump continued, speaking with confidence and authority. But something felt off. The words he chose didn't really answer any questions. Instead of clearing up the rumors, they seemed to swirl around, leaving the audience with even more curiosity than before. Every sentence raised a new question, and the energy in the room shifted from excitement to a mix of suspense and unease. People exchanged looks as if asking, what is he really trying to say? Stephen Colbert, seated calmly behind his desk, observed silently at first. His eyes flicked between the president and the audience, reading the room with a precision that made him such a skilled host. There was no panic, no visible sign of fear or discomfort, but anyone paying attention could see that Colbert was already thinking several steps ahead, planning how to handle what was quickly becoming a high-stakes conversation. Trump spoke about rumors, about things he claimed were false, about people who were spreading misinformation. But rather than settling the matter, his words seemed to bounce off the audience, leaving a trail of confusion and tension. The statements were confident yet vague. They had the effect of a puzzle with missing pieces. The more he spoke, the more people wanted the real story. The audience's reactions were a mixture of fascination and uncertainty. Some laughed nervously at Trump's familiar mannerisms and phrasing. Others stared silently, captivated by the rare opportunity to see a sitting president in such an unguarded public setting. The mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation was almost tangible, like the room itself was holding its breath. What made the moment so compelling wasn't just Trump's presence, but the sense that something unexpected could happen at any second. The president was known for unpredictability. And now, sitting just a few feet away from a late-night host known for his wit and bold questions, the tension was palpable. The audience couldn't stop themselves from imagining the possibilities. Would it be a friendly chat, a confrontation, or something no one could even predict? Time seemed to stretch as Trump paused occasionally, emphasizing certain words and letting his sentences hang in the air. Every movement, every glance felt significant. The audience leaned in. Some clutched their seats. Others whispered to neighbors, trying to guess what might come next. The usual rhythm of a late-night show, the jokes, the applause, the small surprises, had been replaced by something far more intense. A moment of uncertainty and anticipation that held everyone's attention completely. Finally, the initial shock began to settle into a quiet anticipation. The audience had processed that this was real. The president was here, sitting across from Stephen Colbert, ready to speak, ready to defend, ready to face questions. The stage was set for a conversation that could go in any direction. Every person in the room felt it. This was not going to be ordinary. From that moment on, the night had taken on a new energy. It was no longer just another episode of a late-night show. It had become an event, a situation where anything could happen. The unexpected visit had done more than surprise the audience. It had captured their full attention, drawn them into a story unfolding in real time, and made them wonder how it would all end. By the time the initial greetings were over, one thing was clear. No one in the studio would forget this night. The president's unexpected appearance had set the stage for tension, suspense, and a series of events that were about to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. The audience waited, wide-eyed and silent, ready to see what would come next. After the initial shock of President Trump's unexpected visit began to settle, a tense silence filled the studio. The audience had recovered from the surprise of seeing the president walk in. But now, everyone was waiting for something real to happen. It was Stephen Colbert's moment to step forward, and he knew it. He didn't waste time with small talk or jokes. Instead, he decided to go straight to the heart of the matter, a question that had been swirling in the minds of the audience long before the president stepped onto the stage. Stephen leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on Trump. He spoke, with calm but firm authority. "Mr. President," he began, his voice steady, "what's your relationship with Ivanka Trump really like?" The words landed like a bolt of lightning. The studio seemed to freeze in that instant. Some people gasped, others just stared, mouths slightly open. It was a question that was bold, direct, and unexpected, the kind of question that could change the entire energy of the room. The audience had been waiting for something significant, and suddenly, they got it. Trump's reaction was immediate but uneasy. For a moment, his trademark confidence faltered. He gave an awkward smile and tried to brush it off with a chuckle. "Well, Stephen, you know, Ivanka and I, we have a very good relationship. Tremendous relationship. People are saying all sorts of things, fake news stories. Very unfair to us," he said, his tone attempting to sound casual, yet it carried a hint of defensiveness. But Stephen didn't let the moment slip away. He could feel the tension in the room rising, and he knew that a simple, polite answer wouldn't do. He pressed further, carefully choosing his words, maintaining a calm and composed demeanor that contrasted sharply with Trump's flustered energy. Every person in the audience leaned forward, sensing that the conversation was about to turn into something remarkable. Trump continued to speak, moving from one topic to another, but each answer seemed like an attempt to dodge the question rather than answer it. He boasted about his business deals, spoke vaguely about accomplishments, and repeated his claim that the rumors were false. The audience watched closely, picking up on the subtle signs that he wasn't giving a straightforward response. Colbert, however, remained unshaken. He was reading Trump perfectly, noticing every pause, every half-smile, every fleeting glance. The tension grew thicker with each passing moment. The audience felt it, too, a shared understanding that something big was unfolding. They sensed the undercurrent of confrontation, the quiet but undeniable challenge in Colbert's approach. It was a rare moment, one where a question alone carried the weight of a revelation. Stephen shifted slightly, his expression still calm, his tone measured but firm. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. Every word was deliberate, designed to keep Trump off balance, just enough to reveal more than he intended. "I'm just trying to understand," Colbert said softly, "because the way some people are talking, it almost seems complicated." Trump laughed nervously this time. The audience noticed it immediately, a laugh that was meant to mask discomfort, not amusement. He tried to steer the conversation back to familiar territory, discussing campaign victories and economic achievements. But Colbert's question lingered like a shadow, impossible to ignore. Each deflection only highlighted the original question, making the avoidance more obvious. Colbert knew the key wasn't just asking the question. It was creating a space where the truth could emerge naturally. He allowed pauses to stretch, letting the silence emphasize the weight of the moment. He waited just long enough for the audience to feel the suspense, to lean in and silently urge the president to respond honestly. The quiet was almost unbearable, a powerful tool in Colbert's hands. Trump's usual energy was missing. Instead, there was a flicker of uncertainty, a subtle tension that the audience immediately picked up on. He shifted in his seat, searching for words that might satisfy the moment without giving too much away. But Colbert had anticipated this. He wasn't looking for a polite answer. He was setting the stage for something far more revealing. The room seemed to shrink as if the walls themselves were pressing in, holding everyone in a moment of concentrated anticipation. The audience could feel it. This wasn't just an interview. This was a confrontation of truth and deflection, of calm control versus frantic composure. Every second stretched longer than usual, heightening the drama without a single loud exclamation. Finally, Colbert leaned back, just slightly, still calm, still collected. He had planted the seed of suspense perfectly. The audience, fully engaged, knew that whatever came next could change the tone of the entire evening. Trump's answers had raised more questions than they had answered, and Colbert had masterfully guided the conversation to the point where the real reveal could begin. By the end of the segment, the question had done its work. The audience was completely captivated, sensing the tension and anticipating the next move. They understood that this was only the beginning, that something larger was about to unfold, and that Colbert had set the stage brilliantly. The big question had opened the door, and no one could look away. The room was charged, every eye fixed on the stage, every mind racing with possibilities. What would happen next? Would Trump answer honestly, or would the tension escalate even further? Everyone waited, breathless, knowing that the night had already turned into something extraordinary. The room had reached a tension that almost felt physical. Every word that Trump had spoken seemed carefully measured, yet strangely evasive. He talked in broad strokes, boasting about accomplishments and denying rumors, but he had never truly addressed the question Colbert had posed. The audience was leaning forward, curious, alert, and a little anxious. Colbert knew that the moment had arrived to shift the balance of power. Colbert stayed calm, but inside he was fully aware of what he needed to do. The president had attempted to dodge, deflect, and charm his way out of the question, but this was a rare opportunity. Colbert decided that instead of pushing with more words or direct confrontation, he would take control in a way that no one would expect. By introducing an element that Trump could not anticipate, he started softly, almost conversationally. "Okay," he said. "If that's the case, then maybe you can help me understand something." The words were simple, but the effect was immediate. Trump's confident composure faltered for a moment. His eyes narrowed slightly, trying to read Colbert's intention. The president paused, a small flicker of hesitation crossing his face. The audience could sense it, too. Something significant was about to happen. Colbert leaned just slightly forward, his tone measured but sharp. He was no longer asking for information. He was creating a space for revelation. "Because here's the thing," he continued. "I've been looking into some things myself, and I've got a report." Barron did a DNA test. The silence that followed was intense. The words had landed like a quiet explosion. The audience gasped softly, uncertain whether to laugh, be shocked, or hold their breath. Trump's face stiffened, and the color seemed to drain from it slightly. The confident smile that had accompanied him for hours began to fade. He hadn't expected this. Colbert let the words hang in the air for a moment, giving them weight. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. The audience could feel the electricity of the situation, a tension that seemed to pull the very air into the pause. Colbert's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Trump's sudden unease, amplifying the suspense. "And I've got the report right here," Colbert said, reaching slowly under his desk and producing a brown envelope. The action itself was deliberate, almost ceremonial. He didn't hurry, he didn't reveal the contents too quickly. Just the sight of the envelope created a ripple of anticipation through the room. Trump's posture changed. He straightened, leaning slightly forward, eyes narrowing as he tried to anticipate Colbert's next move. The president's usual verbal agility seemed to falter under the unexpected turn. The audience was caught in a mix of emotions, disbelief, curiosity, and a touch of fear for what might happen next. Trump's hands twitched slightly, a subtle sign that he realized the situation was slipping out of his control. Colbert remained composed, giving the impression that he was in complete control, while the president, for the first time, seemed reactive rather than commanding. Colbert didn't speak immediately. He allowed the silence to build, letting the anticipation grow. Every second of pause served to tighten the tension like the moments before a storm breaks. The audience's attention was absolute. No one dared move or speak, as if acknowledging the gravity of what was about to be revealed. Then, in a deliberate, almost theatrical tone, Colbert said, "This report confirms Barron's real mother, and her name starts with the letter I." The words had an immediate, electrifying effect. The audience went silent, caught between shock and disbelief. Every eye was on Trump, whose face went pale. The confident, unflappable leader who had walked into the studio earlier now seemed caught off guard. His eyes darted between Colbert and the audience. A brief flicker of panic evident in his expression. He tried to regain control with a nervous laugh, but it fell flat. Colbert's calm precision was striking. He didn't shout. He didn't demand answers. He simply presented the information and allowed the weight of it to land on its own. The audience felt the impact, the suspense, the drama, and the unexpected power shift all at once. Trump, known for dominating conversations, now found himself reacting instead of leading. The president attempted to speak, his voice tighter than usual. He claimed it was nonsense, called it propaganda, and insisted that the report was false. But Colbert remained silent, letting Trump struggle against the tension that had been created. Every deflection only highlighted the fact that the focus was no longer on him. Colbert had seized control of the room, guiding the narrative entirely. In his favor, the audience sensed a turning point. The power had shifted subtly but unmistakably. Colbert's calm confidence, combined with the revelation of the envelope, had created a moment that was no longer just about questions or jokes. It had become about control, about authority, and about the unexpected consequences of a single bold move. By the time Colbert leaned back slightly, the audience was completely captivated. They had witnessed the unexpected transformation of a conversation. What had started as a standard interaction had become an intense, almost cinematic moment of suspense. The room was charged with anticipation, waiting to see how Trump would respond next. For the first time that night, the president was unsure, reactive, and clearly aware that the game had shifted. Colbert had taken control, not with force, but with strategy, wit, and perfect timing. The audience could feel it. They were on the edge of their seats, knowing that something even bigger was about to unfold. The moment was tense, thrilling, and unforgettable. Colbert had quietly taken the reins of the conversation, guiding it to a point where the unexpected reveal was inevitable. And in that instant, it became clear that the evening was no longer about casual questions or lighthearted remarks. I had become a masterclass in subtle power, suspense, and storytelling. The room had reached a point where the air seemed almost too thick to breathe. Every person in the audience leaned forward instinctively, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The tension that had been building throughout the evening, from Trump's unexpected arrival to Colbert's carefully controlled questions, was now about to reach its peak. Stephen Colbert held the brown envelope with deliberate care. He didn't rush. He knew that the power of this moment didn't come from shouting or dramatic gestures. It came from patience, from letting anticipation grow naturally. The audience could sense it. Their eyes were fixed on Colbert, their minds racing with speculation. Every pause felt electric, every second heavier than the last. Trump, sitting across the desk, was visibly unsettled. His confident smile from earlier had vanished. Instead, there was a tension in his jaw, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had faced tough questions before, dealt with criticism, and navigated countless, high-pressure situations. But this was different. This was a moment that had been carefully orchestrated, and for the first time that night, he was not in control. Colbert took a slow breath and opened the envelope carefully, letting the paper fall naturally between his hands. He didn't immediately reveal the contents, allowed the audience to imagine what might be inside. Every eye in the studio followed the motion, every mind racing with possibilities. The suspense was unbearable, yet magnetic. People could feel the weight of what was coming, and it was thrilling. Finally, Colbert's voice broke the silence. It was calm, almost casual, but it carried the force of the revelation. This report confirms Barron's real mother, and her name starts with the letter I. The reaction was instantaneous. The audience collectively held its breath, a wave of whispers and murmurs sweeping through the room. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and some shook their heads in disbelief. No one had expected the revelation to land in such a precise, sharp, and deliberate way. Even those who had been skeptical of the show's bold approach were caught completely off guard. Trump's face changed dramatically. The confident, unflappable expression he had carried since walking on stage was gone. His face flushed, and a flicker of red crept into his cheeks. For the first time that evening, he looked truly exposed. The words had struck a nerve, and he was scrambling to regain his composure. His hands tightened slightly, and his usual assured body language faltered. "This is nonsense," Trump finally shouted, his voice rising in disbelief. "Absolute propaganda. How dare you say this on live television?" The tone was a mix of anger, frustration, and an unmistakable hint of panic. The power dynamic had shifted, and he could feel it. The audience sensed it, too. There was no denying that Colbert now held the narrative firmly in his hands. Yet Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply held the envelope just high enough for the audience to see the edges of the report without fully revealing the name. His calm, deliberate control of the moment contrasted sharply with Trump's flustered reaction, and that contrast amplified the tension even further. The room was alive with whispers, speculation, and fascination. Everyone wanted to know what was in the envelope, but they also understood that part of the power of this moment lay in what was left unseen. Trump, now standing, waved his hands in frustration, trying to reclaim the attention of the room. "You will regret this," he said sharply, his tone a mixture of warning and disbelief. "I'll speak to Barron myself and confirm this nonsense." The audience remained silent, caught between shock and awe. No one moved. The tension was palpable, like the stillness just before a thunderstorm. They could feel that the evening had become about far more than jokes or casual questions. It was a confrontation, a battle of wit and control, with Colbert clearly in command. Colbert maintained his composure, his expression calm, almost serene. He didn't escalate the situation, didn't shout, and didn't try to dominate the conversation with aggression. Instead, he let the power of information, timing, and suspense speak for itself. The audience could see the effect immediately. Trump, who had entered the studio with confidence and authority, was now reacting, uncertain, and visibly rattled. The moment also revealed something about Colbert's skill as a host. He had not just asked questions or made jokes. He had controlled the pace of the conversation, built tension deliberately, and created an environment where the revelation would hit with maximum impact. The audience could sense the precision of his strategy, the careful orchestration that made the moment both shocking and unforgettable. Even the cameras seemed to emphasize the drama. Every shot captured Trump's changing expressions, the subtle tremors of anger and confusion, and the quiet control of Colbert as he held the envelope. The contrast between the two men highlighted the shift in power from the bold, commanding presence of the president to the quiet, deliberate authority of the host. For the audience, it was mesmerizing. They felt the drama, the tension, and the thrill of witnessing a story unfold in real time. The reveal was more than just information. It was a moment of suspense, strategy, and psychological maneuvering. Colbert had turned the situation into a spectacle, not through shouting or confrontation, but through timing, composure, and control. As the seconds stretched, Trump's frustration became more visible. His voice rose again, but the room had already shifted allegiance, if only subtly, toward the quiet mastery of Colbert. The audience felt it instinctively. The power was no longer evenly balanced. The reveal, simple yet explosive, had fundamentally altered the dynamic of the evening. By the time the shock of the announcement settled over the audience, everyone knew that the night had changed. The conversation had moved far beyond casual humor or light questions. It had become a tense, unforgettable encounter, where one person's calm control had outmaneuvered another's bluster. And the suspense of the reveal had transformed the entire event into a moment people would talk about long after the show ended. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted completely. What had started as a typical evening of jokes and conversation had transformed into something extraordinary. Stephen Colbert had taken control, and the shocking reveal of the report had left the audience in stunned silence. Even the cameras seemed to capture the electricity in the room, the tension, the whispers, the disbelief. Every eye was fixed on the president, who now looked like a man trying to navigate an unpredictable storm. Trump's face, still flushed from the previous confrontation, contorted with a mix of anger, frustration, and incredulity. He pointed directly at Colbert, his finger trembling slightly as if trying to assert authority that had already slipped away. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice rising with a sharp, urgent edge. "I'll talk to Barron myself and confirm this nonsense." There was something almost cinematic about the moment. The president, who had arrived on the stage with confidence and a sense of control, now seemed exposed, reacting rather than leading. The power balance had shifted entirely, and the audience could feel it. Even those who had been cheering Trump before now watched, riveted, as he struggled to regain composure. Colbert didn't flinch. He didn't shout, argue, or back down. His expression remained calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the escalating energy of the president. He simply allowed the tension to linger, letting every word and every reaction sink in fully. The audience could sense that Colbert understood the power of timing and presence better than anyone in the room. He didn't need to escalate because the moment itself was already explosive. Trump, realizing that words alone might not be enough, made a sudden dramatic decision. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping slightly against the floor. There was a moment of silence, a heartbeat where it felt like time itself had paused. And then, without another word, he stormed out of the studio. The doors closed behind him, leaving a charged emptiness where he had just been. The impact of his exit was immediate. The audience was frozen, processing what had just happened. Some gasped, others murmured in disbelief, and a few laughed nervously, unable to hide their astonishment. It wasn't just that the president had left. It was the way he left in a whirlwind of frustration and fury, leaving the room to grapple with the aftermath. Colbert leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. His expression shifted subtly, a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and quiet amusement. The tension in the room began to release, replaced by a collective understanding of what had just transpired. Colbert looked out at the audience and said simply, "Well, that just happened." Those 4 words captured the magnitude of the moment perfectly. They acknowledged the chaos, the shock, and the absurdity of what had just occurred, all without diminishing the drama. The audience responded immediately. Their reactions a mix of laughter, cheers, and stunned murmurs. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every subtle reaction, every whispered comment, and every wide-eyed stare. It was clear that the night had become more than just a late-night show. It had turned into an event, a story unfolding in real time that would be remembered long after the studio lights dimmed. The audience had witnessed a rare convergence of power, wit, and timing. One person had entered the stage with authority and presence, and another had subtly but decisively shifted the balance. Colbert, ever aware of the significance of the moment, didn't rush to fill the silence. He let the weight of the president's exit linger. The audience could sense the careful control behind his calm demeanor. He had allowed the suspense to build, naturally, and the payoff had been nothing short of explosive. People began to discuss what had just happened among themselves. Questions buzzed quietly through the studio. What would happen next? How would the president respond off camera? What did the envelope truly contain? Even as the show's music played and the lights dimmed slightly, the audience was still captivated, their minds racing with speculation. The beauty of the moment lay not just in the confrontation, but in the aftermath. Colbert had created a scene where the drama extended beyond words. The president's exit left a void, and it was a void filled with anticipation, uncertainty, and tension. Every person in the room understood that the balance of power had shifted, if only temporarily, and that they had witnessed a moment few could forget. Colbert's handling of the entire situation was masterful. He had combined patience, timing, and a quiet assertiveness to guide the evening to a dramatic peak. The exit of the president didn't just end the scene, it magnified the impact, leaving the audience to contemplate the event's significance and replay the details in their minds. By the time the studio settled, the audience was still buzzing. The air was thick with disbelief, curiosity, and a lingering sense of awe. Colbert had turned a tense interview into a story of strategy and suspense, where the unexpected had collided with the inevitable. And the result was nothing short of unforgettable. It was a night that would be remembered for its drama, its boldness, and the way a single calm host had managed to take control of a high-stakes encounter. The president had entered with confidence, but it was Colbert's careful orchestration, wit, and patience that defined the evening. The explosive exit was more than a reaction. It was the final punctuation mark on a story of tension, skill, and unexpected twists that no one in the audience would soon forget. The studio eventually quieted, but the impact remained. The audience left with minds buzzing, conversations sparking, and memories of an evening that blurred the line between ordinary entertainment and unforgettable confrontation. It had been more than a show. It had been an experience, a moment that proved the power of composure, timing, and the unexpected. Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your take on this unforgettable moment.